Welcome to Clienting, your place to get information about legal marketing and client development. Welcome to episode number 5 of Clienting. This episode will sound a little bit different than our previous podcast episodes because we actually decided to take the audio from a recent webinar we did about marketing to a new generation of clients. We thought it had some really great information to share with our podcast audience, so here it is. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome everyone to our February webinar from Attorney Sync, Marketing to a New Generation. This is Kelly Street. I'm the marketing director at Attorney Sync.
And I'm Tsakalakis, one of the founders of Attorney Sync.
Happy to have you all here to talk about how to market to a new generation of clients. This is kind of a touchy subject, and Guy, I know you have some feelings on millennials and what that could mean to the world or to people or to marketing.
Yeah, and it's less of a feeling about millennials themselves and more of a feeling about generational labeling of big groups of people in the context of marketing. So, to wrap our heads around these ideas, we try to group people into these different generational groups. And Adam Singer, who's a analytics evangelist for Google, writes a lot about this. He recently had a post on Search Engine Watch. If you look up his post, it's targeting generational buzzwords like millennials mean targeting to no one. And feel free to read that post. But the thing is that trying to say we're going to market to millennials and this is how we're going to do it is really painting with a broad brush. And a simple example, one of the examples that he uses, that a millennial that is growing up and living in a major city is going to have a much different, quote unquote, buying persona than one that might live in a rural community or in a different cultural setting. So I just like to say that because we are going to talk about marketing to millennials. And it's not to poo-poo the entire idea of segmentation, but I think it's important, in particular for lawyers that are trying to attract new clients that tend to be younger, to not just think about things in terms of this is what millennials want, and to understand that there are different ways to segment an audience that aren't just 20-year demographic groupings. So that's kind of my spiel on that. And that being said, let's talk about millennials.
All right. So who are these new people that you should be marketing to? What kinds of messaging do millennials and Gen Z want? And then what are different kinds of things you can do to market to them? So keeping in mind everything that Guy said about millennials and Gen Z, let's now talk about what a millennial is. So they're born from 1980 to 1994, typically. The date ranges for these are really kind of mixed. You get different ones from wherever you're looking, but as a millennial myself who is comfortably within this date range, I feel pretty good about this one because I think anyone younger than being born in 1994, younger than 24 years old, is just on a different level of tech knowledge, of digital nativity than I am. They are technically the largest generation in the US at 75.4 million, and that was as of 2016, I believe. And 68% of them, this is a really big thing to note, 68% of millennials trust in small businesses. That's actually compared to 32% have any sort of trust in large businesses. And then there is also this dichotomy of the old versus young millennial. So the 1980 to 1989 kind of, or 1988 probably, that older millennial mentality versus the younger millennial, and what difference that is and how they're purchasing and the purchasing power they have. And then Generation Z, I also found that this generation is called the iGen, and it's because being born from 1995 on, they've grown up with technology. Cell phones were becoming more common in the late 90s, and so essentially from the time they can remember, their parents or they themselves have had a cell phone, have been online, emailing, and have computer access. They are known as the most tolerant generation thus far. They want to break down barriers of age, race, gender, all of those kinds of boundaries. And so I think that could be really important for your marketing messaging when you're looking at Generation Z, the 23 and younger. They are used to constant connectivity. Like I said, they've grown up with phones. They've grown up with computers. They're always going to be able to be within arm's reach of the world, essentially. And more than any other age generation, they are filtering content for reality. What's real? They don't want companies to use Photoshop or to use one specific kind of model to represent their brand. They want to know what the real is behind what they're looking at. So that's my little spiel on Millennials and Gen Z. Based on those things, what are the kinds of things that these younger generations are valuing? One of the things I found is that almost 50% of millennials would be more willing to make a purchase from a company if that purchase supports a cause. Examples of companies that are doing really amazing things like this, and companies that I believe in and buy from as a millennial, are Tom's. I love Tom shoes. I love that they give one pair of shoes for each purchase you make. Warby Parker, they are an eyeglassware company, and they donate a pair of glasses for every pair they sell. And then Love Your Melon is a hat company that will donate a portion of their proceeds to curing childhood cancer. And that's just such a huge thing for the younger generations. But then, Guy, tell me about all the other stuff that millennials value.
Yeah, well, I was going to even add more to this idea of corporate social responsibility, because I think sometimes for some lawyers, it tends to go towards the wayside, or I don't think they think about it and how it applies to their practice. Dwayne Forrester, who's at Yext, if you look up Pyramid of Social Responsibility, he breaks this down pretty well in some of the stuff that he publishes online. But this is very important to the quote unquote millennials. And so getting into brass tacks of how you apply this is communicating the value of your practice and your legal services through the lens of how it helps people, which for some lawyers, it's like, that's not a new idea at all. But it's for many, it's much different than the more traditional, we have 100 years of experience, we are very aggressive, we fight for you. And the message shifts to, this is how we help people in their lives. So whether it's putting content out, and I think we'll get into some more specific examples of how to do that, because they're another big piece to the millennials in general, and I think younger people, and really people in general, if you look at the research, is that people are visual. And so putting content out, publishing on various social networks, communicating what you're doing in your community to whether it's furthering advocacy or whether it's speaking to causes that you're passionate about that relate to your practice and supporting those causes. But how you help people is extremely important to the decision-making process of the quote-unquote millennials and Gen Zs.
Yeah, absolutely. They want a variety of ways in which to contact you. They want honest and open communications, always want options, kind of in line with what Guy was saying as well on the social responsibility. They want to feel connected to you in some way and telling your story and why you are connected with the organizations you're connected with, or why you do any pro bono work you might do.
The good news is that for lawyers, like, this is the stuff they should be doing anyway. I mean, this is the social responsibility component meshes very well with a variety, obviously it depends on your practice and your firm, but for those firms that are serving legal services consumers, especially at the local level, consumer facing practices, those are the types of practices that lawyers should be and should have been communicating to their audiences this way for a long time. And I think it's even that much more important with the millennial generation, but it dovetails nicely for those lawyers that have embraced that community, education, social good aspect to their practice.
Yeah. And thank you for making note of that, Guy. The thing with the whole secret of the marketing to millennials or marketing to a new generation and Nicola Bood speaks to this a lot as well, is that it's not really about marketing to millennials necessarily. It's about doing the things you should be doing to get new clients and to get that return on marketing dollar investment.
Yeah. Another thing I'll just add, this is kind of out of place for the conversation, but I think one of the things I always like to start with is like, why should we care about what we're talking about? Maybe it's intuitive for many people, but as Kelly mentioned, millennials are a very large group. And another thing that I hear a lot of lawyers say was like, well, millennials aren't making legal services hiring decisions. Usually their parents. One, that's only going to be, even if it's true for a certain segment, that's only true for a short period of time. And two, keep in mind that one of the largest transfers in wealth will be happening between the boomers and the millennials. I think it's like $6+ trillion will be passed on from boomers to millennials. So I think there's this concept that millennials don't, they're not materialistic or they don't care about money or something like that here regularly. And they're going to have, whether they care about it or not, or think about things in a different way in terms of experiences over material goods, they're going to have access to a lot of money. So if you're a practice that is not contingency fee based, whether it's flat fee or hourly or whatever, don't presume that millennials don't have money to pay for your services, because even if the millennials you're thinking about today don't, they're going to soon. And they're going to be facing with a lot of the same legal life issues, and they're going to be making these decisions with buying power. And the decisions that they make are going to have a lot less to do with the traditional types of legal marketing things that lawyers think about, and much more to do with these things like social responsibility. Are you active in your community? Are you authentic, right? That's another big one. Authenticity is huge. I think Kelly touched on that. But like everybody else, even more so, and I think a lot of this has to do with just the climate in which they've grown up in, they're very cynical of advertising. They're very cynical of transparent kind of shilling of services. And the businesses, and certainly applies to law practice, the lawyers that are more authentic, the lawyers that are personalizing and humanizing the services that they're offering, the relationships that they're building, are going to be the ones that are going to resonate more with in the millennial demographic.
100%. So then, how do you market to them? Dun-dun-dun. First and foremost, you're going to need to embrace technology if you haven't already. And this might mean some different things than what you're currently doing. Offering, a big one, offering alternatives to in-person meetings. I believe I mentioned this on the Clienting podcast as well, but I had a conversation with someone in the legal industry who needed a lawyer, and she said that working with the lawyer she did, the reason why she worked with that person was that she never had to be face-to-face with them. She could file all of her paperwork over email. She could fill out everything either over the phone or over email, and it was just really easy and really simple. And she never had to worry about having that going to their office and slogging through in the car to get to them.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a huge one. And we see this a lot with paid media management, like when we manage pay-per-click campaigns and AdWords. Proximity for legal services consumers is extremely important. And a lot of that has to do with this concept that you have to go to the office. So if you're bidding, just one paradigm of this, if you're bidding on keywords to get people to actually call you, to hire you, or to consider your services, if you make it clear on your site or through your live chat or on the phone with them that they have to come into the office in order to sign up with you, you're going to have trouble converting as many as competitors who are making this an online experience that they can do right from their phone, that they can do with a virtual meeting, that they can do through some kind of client portal. That's a huge one that I think that is easily overlooked because it's more of an infrastructure change for a lot of firms. And so I think a lot of firms are like, oh, well, that seems really hard and costly. The good news is that it's really not as hard and costly. You might have to spend some time kind of researching your options, but implementing that will have a huge impact on, one, converting more potential clients into clients, but it'll also improve client satisfaction because, it's extremely inconvenient to ask clients every time they've got to come and sign something to have to come to the office. And the expectation of millennials is that why aren't we using DocuSign? Why aren't you sending me things through secure portals so that I can fill this stuff out or complete this stuff remotely?
Yeah, absolutely. And the secure portals is key, because I know that's one of the things that came up when I was doing research for this webinar, is that Gen Z, especially the 23 and under generation, they're very concerned about their online safety and getting hacked or their information getting out. And so using those specific services like DocuSign can really help create that extra trust there.
Right, and not to go down this rabbit hole, but if you're scared about the security of the web, let me tell you something. Your car and your office are probably less secure. Your desktop computer is probably less secure than if you're using, best practice software security protocols. So it's definitely something lawyers need to be aware of. But the idea that somehow the cloud is this easily hacked thing versus your car, your office, leaving your briefcase out on a desk, those are way softer targets. Now, again, if you're not using HTTPS, if you're not using encryption, if you're accessing public Wi-Fi networks, then yes. So there's definitely some basic competence. But for those that are listening that are thinking, oh, well, I could never do that online because the security vulnerabilities, there are ways that you can implement systems that are very secure and much more efficient for your clients.
Absolutely. And then the other thing about embrace technology, online appointment making. For me personally, super important. I really don't like it when I have to call a place and try to figure out the time and get my calendar out, that sort of thing. It's just so much easier, I think, for both parties to be able to have the little window of appointments available, and you just see that, and then you can book the appointment that works for you and sign up. Good, there, you're done.
There is little that is less efficient than having a group of people on an email thread trying to figure out availabilities, going back and forth to schedule some time.
Yes. Gotta love those.
So if you're doing that, you're making somebody unhappy.
Yep. All right. Social media. That's our next thing. I specifically wrote social media, but don't be weird, because I have heard a lot of pushback on lawyers using social media as, well, who wants to be friends with their lawyer on Facebook? And that's not necessarily what I'm talking about here. And you kind of get around the don't be weird or don't want to be friends with your lawyer on Facebook by using social media how it's meant to be used, using Twitter for those little quick snippets of information, posting a photo of a day in the life at the office, or Snapchat story of, hey, just got out of court here and here's my takeaway for the day. Of course, without using any client information, but using the social media app in the way that it is meant to be used. I've also included Spotify on here. I don't know that it has as much application for lawyers, but Gen Z, they're huge in using Spotify playlists and sharing their playlist of the day. I know Gary Vaynerchuk, who I talk about a little bit on our various webinars or podcasts that we do. He is huge on sharing his Spotify playlist of the day and getting the names of artists that he likes out there. But this could be an interesting way to connect with younger clients for lawyers to say, hey, here's what I'm listening to while working on cases today.
Yeah, and my 2 cents would be, if you're weird, be weird, right? I think for me, the big thing is, don't be inauthentic, right? So like if you're using, the thing I can't stand is you see a Twitter handle that's like Los Angeles personal injury attorney tweeting, get a free consultation if you've been in a car accident. Now that's weird in the way that Kelly's saying, don't be weird. Yes. Now, if you're like into like LARPing or something, then go be out there in the LARPing community, right? And for those that don't know what LARPing is, go look it up. It's amazing. But the point being that if you're into whatever you're into, be into it online, and guess what? The other people that are into that kind of stuff are going to gravitate towards you, and it's going to resonate with that community. And so if you're the LARPing lawyer, then the LARPing community is going to be like, this person is one of us. This is the kind of person that I want to hire.
I'm pretty sure I want to take that Twitter handle now. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not into LARPing, but that's actually
it's going to be a hot commodity after this webinar. Everybody's going after it.
Yes. And then the last thing on there is connect with influencers. So again, be careful to do this in an authentic way. But if there are influencers you know of or want to connect to who have anything to do with your field or are in the cool people in the legal tech industry, that sort of thing, try to connect with them and see if you can get on their radar in a way that is meaningful and makes sense.
Yeah, and especially on a local level, right? Because like I think people hear influencer and they think like, oh, thought leader and stuff like that, but that's not necessarily the kind of influencer you need to go after. Like, think about the people in your local community who are active in all of the organizations or active in the events. Those are the influencers that are going to be more valuable in terms of developing relationships. So, you don't have to get on Gary Vee's radar in order to develop clients using social apps. But I would connect with people in the local community, whatever organizations, schools, the stuff that you're passionate about, the hobbies that you have. That each of these organizations and in your local community, there are these people that tend to be much more socially active. And those are your local influencers. And so a lot of them are going to be online. A lot of the organizations are going to have pages and profiles and Spotify playlists. Find those people locally, because most of the lawyers that we talk to, they're serving clients on a very local level. If you're a startup lawyer and you need to be visible nationally or in a bigger pool, then of course go after some of those bigger influencers, but don't feel overwhelmed that you've got to attract the attention of some kind of major thought leader to get on the map, because you're probably going to find that your local relationships are much more valuable than having Gary Vee retweet you or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And one stat that I found on social media use, I didn't look this up for all of the apps, but 80% of millennials use Facebook, but only 57% of Gen Z do. So Facebook is starting to kind of drift off with the younger generation, and they're much more into, Snapchat especially, but also they're more active on Instagram.
New shininess.
Yay. And so in line with social media, the most important thing to do there is know your brand and make sure that you are communicating the story of your brand. And this doesn't have to be a super heartfelt or what Jamie Casino does, where he's like, my brother was wronged and now I'm fighting for injustice in the world. It can just be something as simple as, hey, I saw this was going on and I knew that that's where I could do some good with my law degree, or anything really that's in line with knowing your brand. Only 6% of millennials consider online advertising to be credible. So when you are telling the story of your brand, you want to make sure that you're communicating this. I keep saying real, authentic, but it's because millennials and Gen Z, they're super cynical. They don't trust advertising, but they do trust online reviews, and they do trust real pictures and real, day in the life post kinds of things.
Yeah, they expect it. That's the thing is that if you're using stock imagery and running ads with stock photography that you think is, representative of your practice area, they're hiding that stuff, right? They're hiding it from their feed on Facebook. They're opting out of it on Google. Alternatively, if you have educational videos talking about the ways that you help people in your community, the causes you're passionate about, standing up for people's rights, those kind of things, they come across, they are more authentic, right? They're you talking about why you are a lawyer and what it means to you and what your clients mean to you. That's the kind of stuff that they expect to be able to see, and that's the stuff they're going to gravitate towards. And the stuff that comes across more as advertising is going to get filtered.
And segmenting your marketing. So part of the reason why I wanted to do this webinar is it's not because you have to specifically have in your mind, millennial, Gen Z. It's more differing your messaging based on the age group or type of clientele that you're trying to go after. And I think type of clientele is probably a better way of describing this. But here are kind of the different things that I was thinking about if you were going to segment your marketing to Gen Z. Like I said earlier, they care a lot about dividing race and gender. So for them, it's really meaningful to see kind of that social acceptance. Look to your website, having that openness, or having the idea that you can be any type of person and go and see that lawyer and you won't feel uncomfortable is a really big deal.
Yeah, and this goes back to my rant at the opening, which is don't segment only on demographic information, right? Start segmenting on psychographic information. We'll put some stuff in the webinar notes about where to learn more about this stuff. But for example, look for trends in your data that reflect like who the people are that are opening certain emails, or that are, what are some of the needs that particular client groups have, especially if you already have, if you've been practicing a long time and you have a long history of clients, look at the type of psychographic information patterns that your clients share and form marketing messaging around that versus just saying 25-year-olds like this, right? Or 25 to 35-year-olds like this. Like it's the wrong segment. It's maybe wrong, but it's too general of a segmentation. Whereas if you start segmenting specifically and personalizing your marketing, personalizing your advertising, you're going to see a much better response, right? So, this is the type of thing that Google and Facebook have learned. And one of the big advantages of being able to do advertising on those platforms is you can personalize marketing messages and advertising messages to much more personal, for lack of a better word, segments than just, we're going to, like what TV used to provide or what newspapers or classifieds used to provide, where it's like the shotgun approach, the same message to everybody. Now you can tailor a marketing message to resonate with much more personal psychographic segments.
Absolutely.
And we'll put more stuff in the webinar notes because that might have been a little bit nebulous for folks that aren't familiar with those concepts. So some follow-up research to do.
Yes, we will make sure you guys get the information we're talking about. And I'll kind of skip the young millennial, but for older millennial, what I really thought about for this is, I know I have some friends and some acquaintances who are estate lawyers, trusted estate lawyers, and there is kind of this idea of like, well, why would I target millennials? Because they're not in need of my services, or they're not going to think that they need my stuff, even if they might. Well, 1 in 4 older millennials are parents. And these are people that could need a living will and trust, or any of those things to take care of their children, and they may not know it yet. So making sure that you're getting those marketing messages out or communicating the why of your services is really important.
Develop relationships with people before they're in need of your services. I mean, that is, I think, such a missed opportunity that too many, businesses in general, but lawyers also in particular think, oh, well, I don't want to appeal to people right when they need my services. But building a trusted relationship with people before they're actually in need, or before they realize that they're in need, while they're doing research, that's really where the web and social networking is so much more powerful than trying to solely focus on direct response. And direct response is just such a small piece of the way that people use the web and use social networks. So yeah, get out of that mindset of like, I have to wait for these people to actually need my services before I start developing relationship with them, before I start engaging with them, before I start creating and solidifying a relationship with them.
Absolutely. Owning your pages. So Guy, you wrote a really good blog post, if I may say so, for
thanks, Kelly. That's sweet of you.
For Attorneys Inc. and on how Google My Business can help law firms in 2018. And it's awesome. If you haven't read it yet, check it out. It kind of goes through all of the things that you're going to want to know about how to maximize your Google My Business page, but then also just making sure that you have your correct information covered on all of these variety of pages, because the last thing you want especially a younger person to have to do is call a variety of numbers and get the wrong ones and then go, oh, well, how do I even get a hold of this place? Never mind, I'm going to move on to the next one.
Totally. And not to dwell too much on Google My Business, but just in the context of millennials, Google My Business covers so many of the things we've been talking about, right? So no matter how someone hears about you, especially younger people, they're going to go look you up online. And so one of the first things they're going to find if you're in control of your Google My Business profile is your Google My Business listing. And what does that listing contain? It's going to contain images. It's going to contain, it has video now. It's going to, you can highlight blog posts. You can highlight publications or organizations or events that you are participating in through posts. It has client reviews and testimonials prominently placed there. So all of these things that we're talking about that resonate with millennials are Google, Google's smart, they get this stuff. And so they're putting all that stuff right in this Google My Business listing. So again, that's we've talked about this on a variety of different podcasts and webinars and even this post. Google My Business should be a big part of what you're focused on in terms of online marketing. In fact, I tell lawyers, if you do nothing else, that's what I would spend my time doing is Google My Business, because it is the most visible thing for when people, whether they look you up by name or firm name, or people want to see testimonials or client reviews. It's like an all-in-one Google shop for people that are interested in that information.
And speaking of your Google My Business page, this goes right into it. Younger millennials, Gen Z, they're much more likely to do the research. They're going to do the research in ways that means they're going to try to solve their own problems. They're going to see if they can figure it out themselves, if they even need a lawyer. They're going to look at your reviews. They're going to get referrals from their friend groups, both in person, and then I have seen a ton of this on my Facebook page with similarly aged friends where they go, hey, does anybody know a carpenter? Or, oftentimes they'll lawyer too, but they're looking for people who they know they can trust because their friends have used them. And some stats that I found here, 70% of millennials feel they have a responsibility to share feedback with companies after they have a good or bad experience. So this means a huge portion of your younger clients are thinking, hey, I need to tell them that they did a good or a bad job. And oftentimes how they're going to tell them that is go online, because 50% of millennials, if asked, will leave a review for you online. All you need to do is ask, and half of them will go ahead and do it.
Yeah, this concept of social proof, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn, the idea of, hey, what mutual contacts, what mutual friends do we have? People that are friends that are looking for recommendations, super, super important to millennials.
Yep. And on that note of doing their research and asking for those referrals, just because they're meeting with you and coming in and sitting down, don't assume they'll sign up and hand you a check right away or hand you their credit card, more likely, because they might just be having that meeting to do preliminary research and see if you're a comfortable fit for them.
Totally. A lot of lawyers I talk to can't stand this aspect to the way the world has changed. So, in the historical thinking for a lot of lawyers is, if they want to get a hold of me or they want to hire me, they're going to do that. There's a lot more of validating why you're the right fit for them now than there's ever been. That's going to continue to increase. I mean, I know tons of lawyers who have great reputations who the feedback is that when they get a call, the potential client says, thank you so much for your time. I'm considering 5 different lawyers right now. I'll get back to you. So if you've got the mindset that this is a one call close or you're an order taker, which is what the people in the sales field use, you can't be. You have to be finding ways to demonstrate your knowledge, skill, and experience, demonstrating why you're the right lawyer for them. Some of that is going to be experience. Some of that's going to be obviously competence, but a lot of it is also like, do you get along with them? Do they feel like they can talk to you? Do they feel like you're going to respond to their inquiries? Most lawyers should know that the biggest source of legal malpractice claims is not being clients not being kept informed with the status of what's going on with their case. This is the kind of stuff, this is the high touch expectation that millennials have.
100%. So what do you get out of marketing to millennials? They get a bad rap. They're known as being really high maintenance. They want all the details. They need to be communicated with all the time, on and on. Well, I mean, it speaks for itself in one respect when I said that 50% of millennials are likely to leave you a review. online reviews matter, and they're a really big deal. And that is one big benefit you get out of nurturing those particular leads and those kind of client relationships, is that they're more likely to tell other people about you. And so the other icons I have kind of here, the three people, of course, you also get clients out of marketing to specifically marketing and segmenting to these younger generations. And that equals money, and that equals reviews, and that equals having people be kind of a mouthpiece for you. So letting everyone in their circle know, not only on online reviews, but then also going on their Facebook page or going on their Instagram, because even if it is a tricky situation like a divorce lawyer, younger generations, because they've been sharing so much more online most of their whole lives, are much more willing to say, hey, I just went through a divorce and it wasn't awesome, but I had this really great lawyer who helped me through it.
Yeah, and I think that the concept of, well, should I be marketing to millennials? I mean, let's face it, there's a paradigm shift that's gone on here. I don't think we're going back to just offline word of mouth referrals. Maybe in some certain circles, people are going to be slower to adapt and adopt online technology. Maybe if all you market to is general counsel in some kind of industry where they're not even reading anything online, maybe you're the exception. But we're not going back to the way it was. So even if you think like, oh, today millennials aren't important, like the younger people are the future. So, and I even think this is one that always comes up is that, as and Kelly mentioned this earlier, but as their parents become older and they're making these decisions for their parents in a lot of cases, and not to remind, going back just to the sheer numbers, they're making up a larger percentage of the total population and largest generational wealth shift in history. So it's not really, to me, I mean, if you're planning, unless you're at the tail end of your practice, if you're planning to be sticking it out for another 10, 15, 20 years, guess what? Millennials are going to be your clients. There are very few practices that aren't going to be touched by millennials. And so, if your thinking is, I don't like millennials or I find them annoying or whatever, one, you're probably painting too broadly with a brush. But two, the world has changed and these are the expectations of your next clients. And so if you want to continue to thrive in the future, I suggest you embrace what the millennials and younger folks are telling us about what they expect.
I couldn't agree more.
You can head over to attorneysync.com. We also offer email tips on a weekly basis and a variety of other things for lawyers and understanding how to market their practices in the digital age.
Yes, thank you so much.